help yourself with that. So I was also told to speak a little bit slower because apparently Spanish needs a little bit more words than English. So the translator ladies asked us to speak a little bit slower to allow them to do the proper translation, especially that we will be now talking about some technical stuff, so that they can support anyone that needs the Spanish translation. So we will be talking during this session about some basic concept about carbon accounting. We will go through the definition of the carbon accounting. We will talk about basics of greenhouse gas emissions. We will talk about the key concepts like scope 1, 2, and 3. You remember I asked you how many people know what scope 1, 2, and 3. About half or even less people raised their hands. I would suspect that most of you heard about it, most of you more or less know about it. And also the previous session was talking a little bit on this, but I would like to kind of repeat it again in a structured way so that once and for all you understand it. Because at the end of the day, it's not rocket science, it's quite simple. Right? And then we will also talk about global warming potential and some other key concepts. So I really would like you to come out of this session knowing these basic concepts because they will be very useful to understand the upcoming sessions. And by the way, in original design, it was also needed to understand the tool that you were just showed. But we had to change the sequence of the sessions. So before we talk about the definition of the carbon accounting, I know that Christine already was talking about the climate change, and she set the scene about why it is worth to talk about the climate change, and I really believe it's worth to talk about it. It's worth to raise awareness about it. But at a certain moment, we go from political, geopolitical, and science-based discussion down to the business, right? And as I mentioned already, sometimes it's better not to approach this subject from a different angle. When you talk with your clients, which are, I understand, financial institutions, and they talk with their clients. If we start to talk about climate change, it might not be, they might not buy into it right away, right? Because none of them are climate change experts. Some of them might be skeptics, right? Some of them might say, we don't believe in it, although they might observe, water shortage in Bogota, right? Or other changing weather patterns, extreme weather events, and so on, right? But still, they can kind of kill the discussion right away with this skeptic approach, or saying, "I don't understand it. Why would I invest in it?" Right? And then the deal is off. The discussion is ended, right? So I always say that you need to know your audience a little bit when you talk with them, right? So with one type of people, you can talk about climate change and then go into, carbon accounting, green finance, and so on. With others, it's actually better to talk from a different angle. And what I mean by that? So reaching an agreement that the average temperature of the globe is increasing between two people that are not scientists and experts in the field, it's kind of pointless, right? I mean, most of people don't have even the proper arguments. Although Christine did provide you with some arguments, right? But the other side can tell you, but I don't believe in it, and that's it, right? So instead of talking about climate change, average temperatures, I very often talk with, and I work with MDBs, I work with the local banks, and I also work directly, mostly with small and medium enterprises, right? And we need to bring this discussion to the level which can be comprehended by them, yeah? Because they are not experts, right? We cannot educate them in 5 minutes. So I talk with them about an environmental impact and about things that you cannot say I don't believe in. So for example, I talk about pollution, garbage on the streets. I talk about reduced number of fishes in the rivers and lakes. You know, we can Google the photos from some industrial countries where the rivers are actually not, let's say, watercolor, but they are like rainbow colors because of the chemicals people put in it. Right? We can look at the smoke over the city. These are things that nobody can tell you I don't believe in it, right? These are facts. So I always advise when you talk with your clients and they talk with the companies maybe, right? Or you talk with the companies directly, it's better to approach this subject from this side, right? Because all chemicals that end up in the water, right? Also the smoke and garbage on the streets or wherever, right? These are indicators of wasted resources. And then from the wasted resources, you can bring the discussion into investment opportunities. It's very easy, yeah? I mean, as I said, I work a lot with some companies in some developing countries, and we do this discussion this way, and then we ask, what do you produce? What materials do you use? How much materials do you waste, right? And then right away we can start discussion, okay, this is technology that you can exchange, you will save the resources, reduce your operational expenditures, and a given, let's say, donor or a bank that has green funds can provide you with this financing, right? So my advice to you is consider that, not to overwhelm people sometimes with some concepts that might not fly, right? And by the way, if we talk about the garbage on the streets, the chemicals in the water, you know, the smoke, and so on, what is the common thing that joins all of these? If you think about it, right? What is the one common thing? It's carbon dioxide, basically, right? The chemicals are made typically from fossil fuels. The plastic is made from fossil fuels. The smoke is coming from burning fossil fuels. And if we go into this discussion and we consider all these wide aspects of resource waste and so on, the common thing that joins everything is the carbon dioxide and in general the greenhouse gases, right? And this is why this particular indicator is considered internationally, right? It's not chosen by luck, it's not chosen by anyone that just likes it, it's because it's a common thing across all these, let's say, wastes, as I call it, right? So carbon accounting actually serves to evaluate, calculate, measure sometimes the amount of greenhouse gases released directly or indirectly from a business or organization operations, right? And understanding of the sources of emissions lead to understanding of the organization impact on the environment. Also defines, you know, the specific points where the emissions happen, right? And what we can do. So there might be some investment opportunities, some saving opportunities, or there might be also the risks, amongst others. You know, we talked about the policy and legal risks, right? Where someone needs to actually change the technology that they are using because it will be banned. Yeah, I mean we do face it in my in my city, there, I mean, it's still in the city, but it's a little bit outside. There are a lot of greenhouses, and they are heated by coal, but this is the worst type of the coal you can get. And now the city just banned it. So many of these businesses have to switch, right? And many of them didn't believe that it will happen, although the legal framework is there and they did get a notice, right? And now a lot of them are in shock. Yeah, if they would consider that, if they would get some capacity building, they would understand they need to invest, right? And also, of course, very often, if you do the carbon accounting, it actually allows you to operate in some given regulated markets. Amongst others, I did mention the CBAM, the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which will allow companies to actually do business. If they do carbon accounting, it will allow the companies to do business in Europe. Why do we have to do the carbon accounting? Of course, from the top of the list, the regulatory compliance. However, many countries where we operate and when you operate, right, they still lack the regulation compliance. And this is where Mr. Mustafa was saying about the ones that are obligatory and the ones that are not obligatory, right? So in some countries, you're already obliged to do that, right? So you have to do that. In other countries, the regulations are being slowly introduced, or actually, as I said, I'm amazed how fast they are being introduced in many countries. But anyways, even without the regulatory requirements, I believe it is very, it's a good idea to kind of do the carbon accounting because of the reasons we mentioned on previous sessions, to do the proper risk management, to understand how the changing climate, how the changing weather patterns, how the extreme weather events that we get, and resulting maybe reduction in energy availability or water availability will impact a given business, right? And carbon accounting is a way of doing that because it actually allows you to point out where are the emissions, where are the risks, and you can think about the opportunities, right? Also, many of the investors internationally are now switching into green finance. Many of them are becoming 50%, 100%, even going into 100% of green portfolio, right? So if you as a financial institution would like to gather capital, there is less and less non-green capital available. So actually doing carbon accounting will again cater the expectations of your investors and stakeholders. Carbon accounting on your side, but also on the side of your clients and the end users, will lead to cost reduction and increase of efficiencies, right? Cost reduction because we use less expensive fossil fuels. We, in general, use less resources thanks to increasing efficiencies. And by the way, by investing into modern technologies, many companies actually increase the quality of products and kind of are able to increase the income in general. Yeah. Another reason why to do carbon accounting, it's because it gives you competitive advantage, right? So the sooner you have capacities in your institution to do the carbon accounting, also to spread the word, to provide capacity building to your clients, right? The more competitive advantage you have against institutions that don't do that, right? It's straightforward. Another reason, and by the way, these reasons are a little bit mixed between financial institutions and companies, just because I believe you should understand both the kind of impact on you as a financial institution, but also as on the clients, companies that you would be financing either directly or through local banks, right? Another reason is long-term resilience. So again, if there's a company, let's say textile company, we can be pretty sure they use a lot of water, right? To do bleaching, to put colors, to wash the textiles. So if they are operating, let's say, in Bogota, which has now issues with availability of water, they are at big risk, right? So if they invest in technologies that will save water, they will recover the water, or even invest in technologies that are waterless, it allows them to be resilient on these problems, which might be solved by the local government or not. We don't know. We don't have the knowledge, right? I mean, for sure the government does their best, but the company needs to continue to operate, right? So, and we could talk about these examples for a long time, but in general, the long-term resilience and also the sustainability of the business can be built from doing the carbon accounting. Of course, carbon accounting is in line with reporting requirements, whether they are mandatory or not mandatory, and also allows for transparency, right? So if we admit that we have one asset that is a heavy polluter, okay, we admitted that, but we can say, okay, but next year we will work on making it more environmental friendly, or we will write it off and invest in something new. And this leads me to the last reason is the innovation and investment opportunities. Again, investing in high efficiency technologies that have low impact on the environment, that don't use fossil fuels, that recover water, don't use so much energy or use renewable energy, allows some of the companies to kind of go into new products, invest in some modern technologies, do some R&D even, and kind of build new wing of the business even, right? So the carbon accounting has 3 pillars or 5 key steps. We can look at it from different points of view. So first of all, of course, we have measurement, and it doesn't have to be always measurement. I would call it data collection, and it can be measurement or it can be indirect establishment of emissions. So this is about establishing the emission sources, the emission sizes, and grouping them into different categories. The next key pillar is reporting. So once you have this data, you categorized it, and now you can create a report about the emissions of your institution. And at the end, we have the verification, right? So, of course, someone needs to check the work done. First of all, people do mistakes, right? Second of all, we assume that you will be reporting and you will be publishing the report. So any mistakes that are intentional or not intentional, at the end of the day, might be seen as greenwashing. And again, we will be talking about greenwashing the third day. It's a big reputational risk. Of course, as a financial institution, you don't want to be accused of greenwashing, because the next Green Deal you will want to do with another donor will be a little bit more complicated, right? So, so these are the 3 pillars. There are key steps that I mentioned in the meantime. So data collection. We also use emission factors depending on type of data we collect, and I will be talking more about it in the next sessions. Then we do the calculations, aggregation on the corporate level, reporting and verification, right? And who should do carbon accounting? I would say everyone, but it's now kind of a dream level request. Of course, who should do? First of all, of course, the institutions that are required. Yeah, and as a financial institution, you might be required either by the fact that you're listed on the stock exchange that is requiring it, or you're owned by an institution, by a government that is requiring it, or you're covered by one of the local regulations that require that, right? And the institutions that are actually required in many countries right now are the stock exchange listed, the large companies, financial institutions, insurance institutions, and private equity and investment firms. These are typically the institutions that are required in many places. But of course, there are also the regulations that are not mandatory, that will kind of, they don't require you to report, but if you want to be aligned with some standards, you need to do carbon accounting, right? Of course.
Maybe yes. It's also a good opportunity to just ask the target audience, like, who is doing reporting, and maybe also to see for what purposes and according to which standard.
That's a good question.
So let's start with the easy one. Which bank is already doing carbon accounting?
This is the Italian Development Bank, right?
Then we had some CAF.
CAF. And it's Asia,
SIDBI?
right?
SIDBI.
Okay.
Indonesia.
And Banco? Yes, okay. And, okay, can you share a little bit of experience of doing this carbon accounting? You have the microphone somewhere? So when did you start? How did you do it? What are the challenges?
Ground.
Okay, now it's fine.
Okay, just as a background, it's not my team directly involved, but since I'm really interested into these topics, I studied a little bit. Last year, CDP for the first time established a CO2 emission reduction target at the portfolio level. So the target is to reduce by 30% CO2 emissions within 2030. And in order to set the target, of course, we had to measure also scope 1 and 2 emissions of the portfolio, the companies we finance in the portfolio. So as far as I know, because we had a look also of what the peers are doing in the market, we are applying the PCAF standards, which are aligned with the GHG protocol. So that's one set of experience that we have, so at the organization level. But then we also do GHG accounting on project at the project level. And with respect to this one, I hope we will have the chance to discuss also in the next few days. But with respect to this one, we try to have a look also of what other climate funds are doing in the context of the Italian Climate Fund, which is managed by CDP. And we are using other standards under the UNFCCC. In addition to the GHG protocol, we are also using CDM methodologies, for instance, and IFI technical working group standards under the UNFCCC. So my comment in terms of the lessons learned from these exercises is that I don't see how these methodologies can be reconciled, because one is, looking at the stock emissions, and the other methodology, the project level one, is looking at avoided emissions against a baseline scenario and the project scenario. So that's the experience and the main question that I would have, and I would share with the group, hoping that someone in the group has the same kind of challenge. Thank you.
Okay, and I hope we will answer your question. And what type of institutions do you finance?
So we finance small and medium enterprises as well as large corporations.
So you say you gather scope 1 and 2 emissions from small and medium enterprises in your portfolio.
I mean, this is what we have been trying to do. I think this is the second year we published them, but I'm not sure exactly if we are using some proxy data. You know, I guess there might be some sector level emission factors, and they took them as a proxy based on the amount financed from CDP. So I guess that's the current methodology they are using.
Okay. That's, reporting on SME carbon footprint is kind of challenging, right? And we have to find a proper solution. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else would like to share their experience in carbon accounting? You have the microphone?
Yes, similarly to the experience of the colleague, we have extended the scope of the greenhouse gas accounting, not just to the estimation of the baseline of greenhouse gas emissions, but also including the expected greenhouse gas emission reduction achieved because of the implementation of the projects we are funded. So we estimate the baseline of our operations, but also the greenhouse gas emission reductions resulting of the implementation of those projects to have a carbon balance. And that carbon balance is the one we are giving, is for the one we are accounting to our stakeholders. That's the climate action impact resulting from the credit operations funded by the bank.
Okay. And what are the challenges you faced during preparation of the data?
Fortunately, there is no list on greenhouse gas emission reduction like the one developed by UNFCCC, the methodologies for the establishment of the baseline scenario, project scenario. That at the beginning was a challenge, but we resolved it thanks to those documents. And at the time of the credit operation origination, let's say, we won't have any information. So all the forecasts of potential greenhouse gas emission reduction is forecasted. We suppose some data, what will be the energy generation, what will be the biogas used for energy generation, what will be the number of hectares to be planted. I mean, the activity data required for the estimation of the project scenario. And the idea is during the follow-up of the project, of the credits operation, to get the information, update the forecast, and have real figures of greenhouse gas emission reductions achieved by the project.
Yeah, and that's the proper way, I guess, right? I mean,
and that will be the MRV, the full MRV configuration of the climate action accounting for the bank.
Of course. Anyone else? There was a gentleman from Asia. I don't. Okay.
So I'm from SIDBI, Small Industries Development Bank of India. It's a DFI working only for the MSME sector in the country. So to start with, I mean, SIDBI has decided to become carbon neutral by December 2024. We have already mapped our scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, and we already have a reputed firm in place. So that's one part. With regard to funding to the MSMEs, each and every proposal which is being each and every loan which is being sanctioned to the MSMEs, it has to pass through several layers of filtration in SIDBI. So we have developed a list of technologies, green, clean, environmental technologies. Over the past 15 to 20 years of experience of ours in the energy efficiency business. And based on that list, we are filtering, and then we are identifying what is the likely emission reduction by implementing this technology in the unit, and what is the energy saving potentials. So we have a digital tool available with us. We have already developed in-house, and then we are calculating the GHG emission reductions. So each and every loan is being filtered through ENS framework we have adopted, the GHG emission reduction potential, energy saving potential, and we have also created a green transitional framework. While India yet to come out with the taxonomy, but we have developed a framework, we call it green actonomy. So we are acting on it. We have identified 9 sectors, 69 technologies, again, variety of, so any activity which is falling in that list and passing through these 4 layers, we are calling it as a green loan. And that's how we are mapping the entire CO2 emission reduction.
And how do you collect the data? What are the standards you're using?
So like in MSMEs, we are collecting the entire, their electrical bills, whatever fuels they are using. So what is the consumption on annual basis of that fuel? Based on the calorific value, then what technology he is implementing. So due to that replacement of the technology, what is the likely reduction in the this emission reduction? So that's how we are calculating that. Okay. So we are establishing a baseline and then calculating the emission reduction.
And this is a bank doing these calculations, right?
Yes.
So you have engineers on board, right? I mean, or like environmental people.
Like I'm an environmental engineer from the background, and I have joined a DFI. Okay. And I'm part of the green vertical. So we are centrally giving all the technical clearance to the entire branch operations in the country of SIDBI. Okay. So that's...
Yeah, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that I forgot to mention for the approach followed by CAF that this is a life cycle approach for the estimation of the greenhouse gas emission reduction potential. Why a life cycle approach? Because during the operation of the project, during the construction and the operation of the project, we also include those greenhouse gas emissions to reduce the uncertainty and maximize the the calculation we are doing is much more reliable than the classical one followed by the greenhouse gas emission reduction projects, precisely because we are including the emissions resulting during the construction and operation phases. And that's information that, depending the client, can be achieved, if not, can be forecasted too.
Okay. Very interesting. Please, Mr. Branimir.
Just briefly question, just I want to know about PCAF, referring to PCAF. We already know, especially is a huge challenge, collecting data for SMEs, non-listed SMEs and others companies, which level of reliability of data referring to PCAF is reporting portfolio. 1A, 1B, 2A, 2B, or others, referring to PCAF.
Okay. You can check it out and then we discuss it.
Maybe Italian colleague can help us.
Do you know this about? I don't think you didn't take part in the preparation of the reporting, right? So
I don't know if you can explain PCAF. What is PCAF? Because I think that not all people knows.
We'll be talking about it soon. So let's maybe discuss it when we get there, okay? And then in the meantime, we will talk and see, not to confuse anyone right now. Anyways. What is the impact of carbon accounting on the economy? So, of course, at first it will increase a little bit the operational cost because you need to introduce, new capacities in the institution, maybe even sustainable departments. You need to gather the data. It takes time and efforts, right? But also, as I mentioned, carbon accounting needs to strategic decisions, right? And it concerns both the financial institutions as well as the companies that you serve. It allows to do proper risk management and become more resilient. It increases the investor confidence in your operations because they understand that you are following the path that the international community is choosing to reduce the climate change, reduce the our impact on the environment. Also, it assures regulatory compliance, allows to innovate, to reduce costs, and increase the brand value, right? I see many banks wanting to be green. They do PR campaigns, they create green products, and they work very hard to get connected with this green or sustainable aspects. What is the impact on the financial institution, right? So internally, again, you need to work on your capacities, train people, and it doesn't take only training few people, one department. Basically, from my experience, the financial institutions that really have a success in terms of sustainable finance and carbon accounting are the ones that kind of raise awareness across the whole institution, because almost every employee has a little bit of responsibility in this aspects. Of course, it allows you to optimize your portfolio, maybe to cease finance of some of the. Is this rain or the ventilation? Rain. Okay. Okay. So finally, we have rain. God's given. Okay. So, so we want to reduce finance in some areas, maybe some sectors that are bound to be banned, bound to see significant reductions in size or even bankruptcy. So through carbon accounting and expecting your clients to do the carbon accounting, actually you can pinpoint such companies, right? Again, stakeholders' trust and reputation, and also as a financial institution, by doing the carbon accounting and doing sustainable finance, you can go into new finance products, right? So, an example from my experience from Poland, we had together. I was back then working for a project on a project for EBRD, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and they provided finance to a leasing company. I think this was the first green leasing facility ever, green leasing facility for SMEs. And this institution, instead of focusing on their existing portfolio and clients and sectors, they decided to go into a new sector. They said, we are very small in terms of agri-finance, and we worked with them together to build a portfolio of green agri-finance leasing in their together, right? So from being the 20th biggest leasing company in agri in Poland, over 2 years they grew to be the 4th or the 3rd largest, thanks to the green funds, right? So this is one of many examples that I saw in my career, that the financial institution actually saw an opportunity and seized it, right? What is very interesting for me here, when I was paying for some groceries with my credit card, I was asked if I want to do it in installments. So this is something that we don't have, at least in Poland. And this alone, the fact that this instrument is available, might actually allow some financial institutions to do green retail finance, to provide finance to retail customers for efficient air conditioning, efficient refrigerators, and so on, these small projects. Because then you have a loan, right, which is in installments, there is the procedure of getting the loan for the clients is easy because there is actually no procedure. He just pays by the credit card and just picks that this is in installments, right? So introducing such a product might be a good idea, for example. This is something that in another country we were trying to introduce, but we failed because it was not in place as a financial instrument. So just an idea. When it comes to external impact, of course, I did mention, but I want to underline how important it is that you show and you're transparent, talking about your carbon accounting, type of standards that you're following. Maybe in some cases you're not covering everything and you explain why, right? But being transparent increase investor trust and allows you to gather green capital from the market. Also, being transparent tells about your strong and weak places, right? And again, your investors and stakeholders can kind of react accordingly to that. And of course, we want to be net zero as humanity, right? So doing the carbon accounting leads to the company being net zero, right, with time. Of course, there is the big risk of data. You saw the discussion here about the data. I mean, the carbon accounting itself, I don't think it's very complicated. You will see some simple examples, and actually, that is it. What's complicated about carbon accounting is data collection. And it's easy where you're a bank that provides finance to corporates, because actually you can expect them to provide you with the data, expect due diligence and so on. They have money, the projects are big, and it's a little bit more easy. I mean, it's much more easy. When it comes to small and medium enterprises, then it becomes quite challenging. First of all, because you're dealing with people that typically have limited knowledge about carbon accounting. They don't have time to deal with that. The loan that you're providing to them is rather small, so typically, right? So they don't want to bother with additional steps. And at the end, even if they provide you with the data, you're not sure with the quality. Where are the data coming from, right? How accurate the data are. And this alone is the biggest challenge of carbon accounting and carbon reporting, since making mistakes, as I mentioned already, might lead into some reputational risks. But again, if you're a financial institution that makes the first move in a given country and provides green finance, you're the first mover, you will grasp the first green projects, right? Typically very interesting, typically something that is quite significant, right? And you get the recognition. So there are a lot of opportunities that you can grasp while doing the carbon accounting. So let's move to the basic of greenhouse gas emissions. First of all, yes? Can you find a microphone?
Thank you. Just before jumping to the next section, I have a question regarding this operational risk. I think Mustafa was mentioning this earlier this morning. And as far as I understood, one of the challenges that we have in gathering the information and the data required to implement this kind of carbon measurement or inventory within the portfolio, to some extent it can generate an increasing cost in originating the loans, because you will have to invest in buying technology or need to hire additional people to go to verify this kind of information on the field. So how this affects the conditions of these kind of loans in terms of interest rate, because I can make a comparison with, for instance, microfinance institutions. When you have to make this due diligence process, you have to visit the smallholder farmers in order to check the assets they have, the collateral they have, and this increases the cost of generating the loans. So in this case, as you will have to go as well in order to gather this data, do these create an increased operational cost in originating these kind of green loans or different kind of products? It can be also applied in capital markets if you are issuing a green bond or a sustainable bond.
Of course it does. How much more it costs, I cannot tell you, because it really depends on on the type of institution you are, the type of loans we are talking about. If we are working with corporates, or if we are working with microfinance, right? Which differ a lot, right? So yeah, it does increase the cost. And this is, I think, the way to get to know it is by doing it, right? And one of the positives of being first in the market in a given country and so on, and most likely there are some support mechanism, technical advisory money that you could possibly use as financial institution to make it easier for you and for your clients, right? And by the way, I do microfinance for women in Jordan. We do green microfinance for women in Jordan, and I learned that for them it's not a big additional burden, because anyways they do gather a lot of data about their clients, yeah. Because microfinance tend to gather a lot of data, right? So we have a good experience there, I have to say, right? They are utilizing some green funds from EBRD, and they are very happy. But of course, in this case, they are provided with a list of eligible technologies, which is also used by, I mean, a different version, of course, but by the institution from India, and this is what saves the efforts, right? And I will be talking tomorrow or the day after about examples from the market and from projects that I did in my career, where we actually dealt with this particular issue of kind of establishing some data, and I will show you the examples, right? And there are some good examples. But yes, you have to prepare yourself to having higher costs, right? And the more you will use some IT tools, like the one presented, the less cost you will have, right? I mean, the times of tracking green portfolio in an Excel are done, from my point of view. We have to move to more sophisticated tools also to assure, data quality. So I hope I will answer some of your questions. I answered now, and I will answer the day after tomorrow. Okay, so what are the sources of the gas emissions, greenhouse gases? Of course, we didn't exactly know what is your level of knowledge, so we had to go from basic to more complicated concepts. So of course, the main sources of greenhouse gases is burning of fossil fuels, mainly for energy, obviously, and the fossil fuels would be coal, lignite, natural gas, diesel, petrol, heavy oil, and any derivation of oil, even more heavy oils and so on. The next one is, sorry, I need to track the time. The next one is deforestation. Unfortunately, a subject known in South America, but it is also an issue in other places worldwide. In general, obviously, a tree is in the process of photosynthesis, is eating up the CO2, using up the CO2 and generating O2. So cutting the tree increases at the end of the day, increases the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere. Then another source of greenhouse gas emissions is agriculture and production of livestock, production of food for human, crop production, fisheries, all aspects of agriculture are sources of different types of greenhouse gases. About the types of greenhouse gases I will be talking about in a second. And of course, when it comes to supply chains, obviously, it's not only the farming that is the source, but also any packaging action, cooling action, right? Transport, or food processing. These are also sources of greenhouse gas emissions, very significant one. Another is industrial processes, whether it's for energy production or in form of electricity, heat, steam, compressed air, which is very often used in production facilities. And by the way, compressed air is very often a source of heavy wasting of energy. Then chemical reaction, in general product manufacturing using obsolete production lines. Also, we do have some fugitive emissions, which are basically leakages from equipment, waste, so any resources that we waste and they end up on the landfill will also generate greenhouse gases. And of course, construction and transport, obviously, within the industrial processes. Another source is coal mining, and in general, mining, there is a lot of methane release, there is a lot of energy used for processing. Also, the storage leads to emissions of greenhouse gases, and at the end of the day, the transport again, which is the last source of the emissions, whether it's burning of fuel, whether it's production and use of tires, or even use of brake pads, all of these are sources of emissions. Any way of transport typically is a source of greenhouse, unless this is a muscle, if you use muscle as a source of energy. I think Christine was showing what's the composition of greenhouse gas emissions. It might differ a little bit because I think I used a different source. But in general, the biggest source of greenhouse gases is electricity and heat production. And the heat is whether it's heat for manufacturing or whether it's heat for buildings, it's covered by this category. Then, of course, transport, industry, buildings, and construction. And there are also other sources. And there are opportunities across all these sectors to reduce the emission gases. And of course, what are the actions that lead to a reduction of emissions? We call them mitigation. Of course, you all know that, right? Because we live in a world where the word mitigation, adaptation is used all the time, especially amongst the development institutions. So any action that leads to minimizing the emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, it is an action. It is a mitigation action. Of course, in order to do the mitigation, we need to understand the process that we want to work on and think about whether what to do with this process. And I think the best way to think about that is by looking at this triangle or pyramid. So first of all, when we have a process, we consider whether we need this process. Maybe we can not do it at all, right? So we try to avoid emissions. If we cannot avoid it because we need this process in our operations, we should think about reducing CO2. So whether we can increase the efficiency of the process. So whether it's air compressor that might be more efficient, right? Or whether it's a more efficient means of transport and so on, right? So we think about how to reduce it. The companies should look into types of technologies that are available on the market. Very often we use term best available technologies. So the technologies that are the best, have the highest efficiency, the lowest impact on the environment, amongst others. This needs to be considered. Then the next step, once we already kind of considered two previous ones, is switching. So using maybe another source of energy, from going from fossil fuel energy into renewables. So we invest in photovoltaics, for example, in our institution. And the last is offset, which is basically buying green energy in the simplest way. Just a recap, because we talk about mitigation and adaptation. Do you know what's the difference between the mitigation and adaptation actions, just to be sure? Who knows? Hands up. So who doesn't know? Oh, some people just don't want to raise the hands. Okay. Okay, just to be sure, because we are here coming from the, let's say, general. I think Christine was talking about it, right? No, you didn't. Okay, because it's actually, we assume everybody knows, right? So, but it might be not the case. So mitigation is the actions that I just described, right? Reducing CO2 emissions in general. Adaptation, so mitigation is reducing our impact on the climate change, right? Reducing anthropogenic, so human impact on the climate change. While adaptation is adapting to the climate change already happened, right? So say this unfortunate issue with water in Bogota, now we have to react, right? A company that I mentioned, let's say a textile company, now needs to react because they don't have water. So they need to adapt to the new situation. So an investment that would reduce their water consumption and allow them to actually continue the production might be considered as adaptation action, right? But of course, there are typical adaptation, let's say, solutions like disaster management, flood protection. I understand also there is a risk of floods in Colombia right now, so flood protection measures are also adaptation. And in general, any actions that kind of reduce your exposure to climate change and any events connected with the climate change. Of course, there is a big part of adaptation finance which focuses on resilient infrastructure, so roads, pipes, electrical cables and so on, that are resilient on any extreme weather events, high temperatures, low temperatures, and so on. And there are also some solutions that are in between mitigation and adaptation, because at the end of the day, for example, photovoltaics, right? Typically we say this is mitigation because we invest in solar power, so we reduce the use of fossil fuels. But what if we have a country which is not very well electrified, and the climate change leads to blackouts, grayouts, right? Limited availability of energy, and then someone buys the photovoltaics. Then it's also a little bit adaptation, right? Because we had energy, now it's getting very hot, for example, and the efficiency of transformers drop and there's less energy. So company buying renewable energy or source, so photovoltaics, for example, is actually adapting to the changing climate. So there are other examples that I will be also talking the last day about. key concepts, few key concepts, just to be on the same side. Wait. Okay. So, first of all, of course, you all understand that there is more than one greenhouse gas, right? Right? So, of course, we all talk about CO2, but what we actually are talking about typically is CO2 equivalent. So, of course, in order to make our life easier in terms of reporting, it's what's the source? It's IPCC, right? IPCC came up with the idea that we should aggregate the greenhouse gases in terms of numbers into one number, which is CO2 equivalent. And how to do it, right? Because not all the greenhouse gases have the same impact on the climate as CO2. So they created global warming potential, GWP, which allows to recalculate other greenhouse gases into CO2 equivalent. Let me just show it to you. Okay, so carbon dioxide, CO2, has the global warming potential 1, and then there is a long list of greenhouse gases. This is only a few examples: methane, nitrous oxide, hydrofluorocarbons. This is one of them here as an example: sulfur hexafluoride, and so on. So this would be the refrigerants amongst others, right? So. And there are a lot of refrigerants, and they are basically the global warming potential is very, very much worse than the CO2, right? So if we have one ton of CO2, we have just 1 ton of CO2. What if we have 1 ton of methane, but we want to reflect it in the CO2 equivalent? We need to multiply it by 21, and then we can add 1 ton of CO2 and the 21 tons of CO2 equivalent coming from methane, right? So we have 22 tons of CO2 equivalent, right? Somebody was asking how it is calculated in the tool that was presented. So this is one of the basic concepts in the tool, right? Oh, sorry for this. Oh. Okay, so we have a Slido now, just to make you awake a bit. I guess the pressure dropped because of the rain. So please try to answer the question: what are the greenhouse gas emission sources of your institution? Should I push next? Wait. Okay. Okay, it's happening. Yes. So you remember the ladies were talking about the scope 1, 2, and 3. So for financial institutions, it's quite clear which scope would be the highest in terms of emissions, and these answers will actually show if you understand that. Okay. Oh, it even shows how many people are. Okay, good. Good. So we wait a little bit more. And in the meantime, please think what would be the highest source of emissions of your institution going across the whole, let's say, value chain? Does it close itself? Okay. Does it? Oh, no, wait. Come on. Okay. So can somebody tell me, as a financial institutions, what would be the highest source of emissions coming from your operations? And yeah.
For the CAF's case, are mainly the ones coming from the flights for the follow-up and origination of credit operations, mainly.
Flights
Flights.
of your employees?
Yes.
Okay. So transport in general. Okay. Any other answers? Yes?
Okay. From CDP is definitely the financial assets.
Okay. 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 Any other ideas? No?
Ours as well is transport.
Where are you? Oh, here. Okay. Transport. Okay. So let's have it in mind, and then maybe you recap your answers, even if you have your answers in your head. So I know that the scope 1 and 2 and 3 was already mentioned by the ladies, but this is one of the concepts we will repeat a few times during these 3 days, because it's an easy to understand concept and you need to remember it. And there's no way you come out of this training without understanding it. This is the only time, the last time you need to listen to it, and you should just remember. It's quite straightforward. So, scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, the concept was created in order to segregate the emissions coming from the institution. Scope 1 emissions are emissions coming from your own sources, the sources that you own as an institution, right? So, if you have a building and it has a gas boiler, you own the building, you own the boiler, and the boiler burns natural gas. This is a source of scope 1 emissions, right? If you own cars, if you own airplanes, if you own these assets, right? And they emit emissions, these are scope 1 emissions, right? Like I said, very easy. You need to own the asset. Then scope 2, come on. Scope 2 emissions are indirect emissions coming mainly from, let's say, the energy and water that you purchase, right? So typically, as an institution, you own the building, but you don't own the power plant that actually emits the CO2, right, and produces electricity, right? So here you don't own the asset, but your asset is using the electricity. So typically, scope 2 emissions would be emissions coming from electricity, water use. If you buy heat from district heating, for example, this would also be scope 2 emissions, right? And then scope 3 emissions. Do I still have time? 5 minutes. Okay, good. Scope 3 emissions are upstream, downstream emissions from your supply chain, let's say, and amongst other, so this would be investments, right? Finance provided. This would be employee commuting. This would be also flights with the planes that you don't own, right? This would be emissions from cars that you lease as an institution, and there are other kind of types of emissions that are coming from your supply chain, right? So, as a financial institution, again, what are the biggest emissions coming from across scope 1, 2, and 3? Which scope is the highest one? Okay. Okay. So now I understand you understood, right? So let me say it loud. It's scope 3 emissions, obviously, because say you're a bank, you own, I don't know, 50 buildings, right? But at the same time, you might have a portfolio of 1,000 buildings, right? So your 50 buildings emissions is, let's say, nothing against this, the emissions of your portfolio, right? So that's the setup for you as a financial institution. For your clients, if they are local banks, would be similar, but for the companies that are being financed, typically, especially when it comes to manufacturing companies, scope 1 and 2 would be the highest sources of emissions, right? And what is, so again, I have to say, scope 1 and 2, tracking scope 1 and 2 emissions for you as a financial institution is not too complicated. You just gather the energy bills, you look on the asset that you own, and this is manageable, right? You can hire someone, you can teach someone to kind of go through this data gathering. The data are actually available because they are directly connected with the costs you incur. So you have invoices, like I said, for fuel, for energy, and so on, right? So this is something that is doable, right? But when it comes to scope 3, this is when it gets more complicated. This is where the data collection is actually becoming a challenge. How different institutions deal with the data collection? How do they do green finance that provides carbon reporting, carbon data? We will be talking over next 2 days, and especially the third day. So I'm leaving good examples for the end so that you stay with us. And the last concept, since we are running to the end of this session, is carbon sinks. So of course, these are natural or human-made, how would you call it, systems, right? Systems that absorb CO2. So of course, forest, right? And you can hear many institutions that they are planting trees, right? And you know that for sure they are reporting against each tree that they planted, because this is why they are doing it. Of course, they want to be more environmental positive, but at the end of the day, they will for sure report on kind of carbon sink that they did. Of course, the oceans are also carbon sinks, and just small comment, we have biochemists here, right? And chemists, guys? Okay. So, CO2 is also diluted in oceans, right? An amount of CO2 in water impacts the acidity of the water, right? Am I right? You do have some knowledge about that, right? Excuse me? Yeah. Okay, but this is what it is. So, if we are increasing the CO2 amount in the atmosphere, automatically the amount of CO2 in water also increases, and this has an impact on acidity of the water, and this will have an impact on plants and animals and fish, in the water. In many cases, above certain acidity, some plants will die, right? And then we lose another, carbon sink, and this might be a very this might have a huge impact actually on the climate, right? And this is something that we don't talk too much because it's too complicated and so on. But really, it's not only about the CO2 in the atmosphere. Please remember, it's also it concerns also oceans, and of course we can observe the coral reefs dying off, and one of the reasons is actually increased acidity of the oceans, right? And again, instead of talking on the high level climate change, anyone, and I wish you can do that, just jump into the plane, Go to Australia, go to any other place where they have coral reefs, and you can see that the coral reefs are dying off. And the reason is, amongst other, the climate change and increasing acidity, right? So this is a very important, just interesting aspect that we also talk. We were talking about nature positive solutions and nature-based solutions. And when we talk about it, we talk a lot about the wetlands and peatlands that also save in many places cities or some places from flooding. It is proven that wetlands stop floods from going into the land. Of course, soil is a big carbon sink. I will be talking about soil erosion the third day, grassland, mangroves, and also urban green spaces. And I'm so happy that so many cities are now kind of stepping back from putting concrete everywhere, right? And going more green, right? So that's another example of carbon sinks. So that is it for today. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, we are still here, and I believe we will have now the visit to the, what's the name? Tropicario. Okay, sorry, because I don't know the full agenda.
Sorry.
Okay, so let's have a coffee break until 3 p.m.
There's last question maybe.
Yeah.
So when we talk about carbon sinks, we are basically talking about CO2 sinks. What about the other global warming potential like methane, hydrofluorocarbon? Where does that go? Like how we can mitigate that?
Hydrofluorocarbons are man-made, so we don't want to really sink them. Most of them, right?
Yeah.
So we just want to remove them from our life whatsoever.
Okay.
And there is a special agreement which is called Kigali Agreement and Montreal Agreement that deal with the refrigerants, right? Excuse me? And F-gas direct. This is the newest one in EU, right? But Kigali goes across the whole world. I mean, I don't know if there's a country that didn't sign Kigali Agreement, to be honest.
So one more question, like what is the total global warming? What is the percentage? Like how much is CO2 contributing? How much methane is contributing at present? Is there any data? Like I can Google it, but
that's tough. What's the percentage?
Like what is the composition?
I don't have the number in my head.
No problem. No problem.
We can discuss it later on. Yes.
The SF6, that's the greenhouse gas with the highest global warming potential, is mainly used in the energy industry. It's an isolation gas to turn off the electric arc, let's say. And the amount used is quite low in those equipment. The equipment with most use of SF6 is what's called a ground insulated substation. Yes, a power substation isolated. And in general, are amounts not even 1 ton in quantity. Of course, 1 ton times 23,000 for the global warming potential could be considerable, but in general, isn't a greenhouse gas with a material participation in at least in the greenhouse gas national inventories.
Okay. I just got. You're asking which of the gases have the biggest impact?
No, sir.
In general, right?
Impact-wise, you have told like what is the composition in the environment, like how much methane is contributing to today's global warming right now.
Okay, so I don't have this number, but the highest, of course, is CO2 in general, because we have the highest amount of that is being emitted, right?
I think in the last report of the IPCC here,
okay, sorry.
PFCs and HFCs amount 2% of the global greenhouse gases. So it's a really small percentage, but they are really have a high global warming potential.
Yes, but this is the latest report after many years of reducing use of harmful refrigerants, right? So you can actually see the effect of the
1.7 and 2.1%. So it's around 2% of the global composition.
Yeah. Okay. 80% CO2, 20% methane. Here you are, more or less.
80% is CO2, 12% methane.
12% methane, and the rest are.
The rest is all the exotic chemicals like SF6 and HFC and other
nitrous oxide. Okay, thank you a lot. I'm happy that we had some discussions. And we now go to the coffee break, then Tropicario, and then we meet tomorrow at 8?
Exactly, at 8 again here in the room. I think the same procedure as this morning will happen. So you have received the email from Ding. So like tomorrow again at 7:10, I think to gather in the lobby, and then they will bring us again here to the venue. I also was told that please take this name back tomorrow with you. Without this name tag, you are not able to enter the building. This is very important. So please take it with you, bring it tomorrow morning, because otherwise you will not be able to enter the building. They will control at the entrance.
I already lost it, so. No session.
Okay, no session tomorrow. No. Okay, now we go for the coffee break, and then our colleagues again will have will show up the sign, and we go together for the Tropicario visit.
Thank you.
Do we have to take our stuff to the Tropicario? Or
yes, I would say you have to take now everything. I look here, Lina.
Here.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. Okay. Please take all your stuff, what you need. And then we go for the Tropicario visit. Thank you for the question.